Hello everybody, here we are today doing my Eastern and Western semifinal preview. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the CFL, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So the first game we have is the Eastern semifinal as the Ottawa Red Blacks travel over to play Toronto. And this one is going to be a fun one, mainly because I think that Ottawa has that ability to play upset here. They posted their first winning record in a minute, made their first playoff appearance since 2018, and are a team that can be dangerous. It seems a little odd considering they finished 7th in the league for offensive points, but this team can score a lot. They scored 68 points over their final 2 games, and Drew Brown has that ability to go off for those big games. We've seen that multiple times throughout the year. He dealt with some injuries and whatnot, but this organization does feel comfortable airing out the ball. They are a group that will throw the ball 45 times in a game or more, and I think that could be a strength for them as they have guys like Ackland, Rhymes, and Hardy in the receiving core. But I think at the same time too, their inability to run the ball at times can be a little bit problematic, especially if teams are able to shut them down through the air. They released Armstead, and in general are a side that is pretty one-sided on the offensive end. As for the defense, they have kind of struggled at points this year too, especially to close out the season. They're going to have to step up as well too, because if the offense does have a slow start to the game. We've seen Toronto be able to go out there and put a lot of points on the board against them, but of course too, one of those things that could be an X factor in this game is Lewis Ward for Ottawa, a kicker that has been in the CFL for a long time and is certainly having another good year. He can get them 3 points if he gets them within range, or if they get him within range. But of course, you'd always rather try to go out there and get 7 points instead of 3. So on the flip side, you have the Toronto Argonauts, which I think are an intriguing case because we get a little bit of a different look from them. They had a totally different starter for the first half of their season in Cameron Dukes. Of course, Chad Kelly was suspended. He comes back into the fray and is going to be a huge impact in how this game goes. He likely has Toronto's playoff fate in his hands, and he's going to have to try to have a good game against a defense that can go out there and force turnovers. But he is also going to be having a pretty good receiving core with a mix of some of those young and up-and-coming players in the CFL as well as some proven athletes. I think that one thing that I do kind of like about Toronto a little bit more is the fact that they have Kadeem Carey and their offense can be a little bit more mixed. And at the end of the day, this team went 16-2 last year. They do look a little bit different, but I still see the ability for Chad and them to have a big game. I know his numbers may not look great, but he had a 4-interception game earlier in the year. And it wasn't that long ago, again, that Toronto was able to get a win over Ottawa. And they had a pretty good cushion before the Red Blacks went on that march in the fourth quarter to try to make it somewhat competitive in this. So yes, this is going to be one of those deals where you watch out for this, but I think the defense especially is going to be one of those things you watch out for. They've had a big issue allowing completions of 30 yards or more. Ottawa being a team that is very pass heavy. If this game goes the way that it could go, Ottawa is likely going to win through the air. If they lose in the air, they're just going to lose this game. So I think for this one, I'm going to be picking Toronto, mainly because they're a little bit more mixed. They've got that balance, and I feel like they're a better side. I know that Ottawa was able to pick up a couple of wins at the end of the year, but they had a stretch where they were certainly not playing their best football, although they had dealt with some things throughout the season. And then you have the Western semifinal, which I think is interesting. And in this case, you have the BC Lions playing the Saskatchewan Roughriders. BC ends up being the road team, thanks in part to kind of a collapse, if you will, at one stage in the season. And I think that them getting to 9-9 honestly was a positive note. But one thing that kind of glosses over an underwhelming season is going on a run to the Grey Cup and winning it. Is it going to be the case? Maybe not, as this offense is underwhelmed at times this year. They finished with just 21 passing touchdowns, which seems really weird when you look at the fact they have Vernon Adams Jr. and Nathan Rourke as their quarterbacks. It's just odd. You've got McInnes, you've got Hollins, you've got some other players as well as in that receiving core that are either proven players or having really good years this year. So you'd imagine the offense would be better. I think a big part of this was just not being able to finish drives, especially when they're in the red zone. They had one of the worst red zone touchdown percentages in the league, if I do believe. And in general, are an offense that really screams we can do something, but at the same time too, you had multiple stretches throughout the season where they had weeks without a passing touchdown, which is kind of concerning. And they do have Williams stand back there in the backfield, but he's also a player that 4 out of the 5 past games that he's played in either hasn't got a lot of touches or hasn't been able to do a whole lot in that time. So I'll be curious to see if he could be a difference maker, especially with Saskatchewan being a team that's done really well against limiting the run. So hopefully Stanback can have a nice playoff performance for a BC team that could be using a little bit of an alleviation from their quarterbacks. I don't think that's a word, but that's okay. Now, as for the defense, they've also not really lived up to some of that hype as well, too. But to close out the year, they did finish it in a strong manner, kind of. I know that 2 of their 3 final games were good, but if you look at the fact that they played a bad Calgary team, and then you look at the fact that they played a list of Montreal's backups, you understand why there is a little bit of a reason to worry here. I don't know, at times it feels like there's been some weird comments from the front office and the organization. So in general, this feels like a team that certainly has underachieved, but at the same time too, I feel like a lot of fans really would expect them to be beat by Saskatchewan, a team that nearly did go out there and win the West, had Mother Nature kind of went in their favor. Now, as you look at the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they're a team that nearly won the West and were a side that were winless over a 7-game period, but were able to have a pretty good run to finish out the season. I know they lost that last game to Calgary, kind of meaningless if you will, but they had a 4-game win streak before that and averaged 33 points per game in that time, with their offense, of course, scoring, but obviously their defense being able to make plays as well. That's going to be a difference maker in here. You're looking at guys like Roland Milligan that could have a big difference in this game and impact, and you see a Saskatchewan defense that helped have the best turnover differential in the league. They can make plays, and for a BC team at times that have struggled to make throws, this would be a great time for their backers, especially to go out there and maybe get a pick six or something like that and really set the tone for this game. As for their offense, Trevor Harris is back. He's had some really efficient days where the numbers look good as well too. If you can have a game like he had a couple weeks back where he had one of the highest completion percentages in the league in a minute, that's going to be a huge problem. Then you've got AJ Ouellette and then Armstead that could pose a serious problem to BC. I just think we can point out to the fact that Saskatchewan has a little bit more momentum, although at the same time too, I think we could point out the fact that they didn't play a lot of strong teams during their 4-game win streak. A bad Calgary team, a Ottawa team that wasn't playing the best, and then they had another win in there that wasn't exactly picture perfect. So it's weird because you're trying to get a feel for two teams that had a underwhelming year in some ways, but I'd say for Saskatchewan, they're in a better situation to win right now. They're at home, and this is where things are going to get interesting. And I did want to throw out a little interesting nugget here for the Toronto-Ottawa game. Ottawa is 2-7 on the road. Meanwhile, Toronto is 7-2 at home. So if you're looking for something a little bit to kind of lean you in one direction, you have that. And that'll basically do it. So I'm picking the two home teams this week. And of course, in the CFL, we'll see what happens because we thought Toronto was going to go into the Grey Cup and they ended up getting beat pretty bad by Montreal in the Eastern Final last year. So anyway, what are your picks for today? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe and have a great night.